Hi everyone, I'm Miss Fur. Welcome back to another video. So I've started by sharing a visit to the garden centre. I went there yesterday and it was really nice to see the autumnal flowers out and all the autumn display inside the garden centre. But I actually went to buy something quite boring but practical. I went to buy a couple of thermal fleeces for my plants. So you get a pack of 2 of these fleeces that you can then wrap around your plant to overwinter them. So the pack of 2 were £15, but I had a discount for the garden centre. So I've opened it out to show you, and the fleece is about the size of a single bed sheet. So I'm going to use it to wrap around a large banana plant that I've got. Last year I cut the banana plant down to a stump and then dragged it into the house and it survived the winter. But this year I'm thinking if I wrap the fleece around it and then drag it into the garage, then it may survive again that way. So the next part of my video, I was going to do some jobs in the garden because there's always things that you can do, but it's actually such a beautiful day. It's a really gorgeous, crisp autumn day that I've decided to go for a walk to Lime Park, and I'm going to go and walk on the moors up to a building called the Cage there. And it's really nice to get high up and to blow the cobwebs away with a crisp autumn walk. So come along with me for the second part of my video. Here's an autumn recipe that almost makes itself. Baked apples. Scoop out the inside of the apple, removing the core. Then fill the apple with anything you like. I'm using raisins, brown sugar and butter. You can use chopped nuts as well. Then add a pinch of allspice. You can add cinnamon or nutmeg. Bake for 15 minutes on medium heat. And serve with ice cream or cream. So this is my baked apple, and I'm just going to have a little bit of it. Delicious. I've topped it with some cream, but you could have it with ice cream or with yogurt, and it's just the cinnamon and the currants and the apple all coming through. It's a real taste of autumn. So now I'm going to finish my video by doing a book review. And whenever I go for a walk on the moors, I'm always reminded of Wuthering Heights. And I thought I would talk about that book because I think it's such a good book to read for autumn, because it has this gothic horror element to it. And I think people who dislike the book imagine it to be a romance story, and then when they read it they find that Heathcliff is not a romantic hero. I've actually made some notes because I wanted to not leave anything out, and I wanted to do the review justice. So first of all, it's basically a story of two families and who are farming families in Yorkshire, and they are the Earnshaws and the Lintons. So it starts with Mr. Earnshaw finding an orphan when he goes to Liverpool, and he brings this orphan back and he names him Heathcliff, and he already has two children, Cathy and Hindley. And Cathy becomes attached to Heathcliff, and Hindley despises him because he's jealous of him. Then when Mr. and Mrs. Earnshaw die, Hindley takes charge and Heathcliff is treated like a servant, so he's abused by Hindley. There is another family called the Lintons, and they live nearby in a house called Thrushcross Grange. And there's a brother and sister, Edgar and Isabella, and they are like the opposite to the Earnshaws because they're very refined and well read, and they're sort of indoor children, whereas Cathy and Heathcliff are wild children who run around on the moors. But then Cathy becomes friendly with Edgar Linton, and she eventually agrees to marry him. At this stage, Heathcliff runs away, and then he returns about 20 years later. He's very wealthy and a powerful man, and he's come back determined to seek revenge on Hindley and seek revenge on Edgar, and he doesn't care who he hurts and who he destroys in his quest for revenge. So it's really a story of two families, Heathcliff's abuse and then Heathcliff's seeking revenge. So it's much more that rather than a story in a romantic sense. I've also put here that the story is actually, it's very interesting because it begins with an outsider, Mr. Lockwood. So the story starts with Mr. Lockwood renting Thrushcross Grange, and then he walks up to Wuthering Heights to visit his landlord, Heathcliff. And he stays the night at Wuthering Heights, and there he has this experience that he thinks that the ghost of a child is breaking the window and trying to come in. And she's screaming that she's Cathy and she wants to be let in. In the morning, he seeks out the housekeeper, Nellie Dean, and he asks her why Heathcliff is so strange and what's the meaning of this experience that he's had. And Nellie Dean explains that she was the nurse to the children when they were growing up. She was with the family, the Earnshaws, and she looked after Hindley and Cathy and Heathcliff. And so she then starts to tell the story of the events from when they were children. So it's an interesting way of writing because we have the outsider, Mr. Lockwood, then Nellie Dean is telling him the story. And so in a way, it's as if we are being told a ghost story because she's talking about events that happened 20 years ago. So it's as if we're learning about events that happened a long time ago, and it's like a gothic ghost story. The other thing is that I put here the reasons for why I really enjoyed the book is, first of all, the writing is so different to any writing that you'll find in other books. It's incredibly intense. The fact that it was written by a young woman, Emily Bronte, it's just remarkable. It's like reading really intense poetry or reading Shakespeare. The speeches that the characters say to each other are just incredible. They're some of the finest speeches that you will read in literature. So one of the reasons for really enjoying reading the book is the beauty of the writing. The second reason is the descriptions of nature. You really are immersed in the landscape. Her descriptions of Wuthering Heights, the bleakness of the moors, and the way that she describes the surroundings. So you really feel as if you're there. Thirdly, there's this very eerie supernatural feel to the whole story. There's this ghostly element. When the story begins, one of the main characters, Catherine or Kathy, is dead, and she is coming back, and Heathcliff wants to be haunted by her. He wants to be possessed by her. And so we have this eerie supernatural feel that Heathcliff isn't really human. He's like some kind of monster. It reminded me a little bit of Frankenstein, where a monster's created and circumstances have made the monster such that now he can't really fit into normal society. And so there's this very supernatural element to the book. And I've also put that Nellie Dean, she's actually an unreliable narrator. So she says at the beginning that her favourites were Mr. Hindley, and she actually didn't like Catherine, and she didn't like Heathcliff. So when she's talking about past events, she actually puts a spin on the events to make it seem as if Heathcliff was this monster as a child and Catherine was this very spoilt young lady. But in fact, in one part of the book, we actually have Catherine's diaries that she wrote when she was a child. And in these diaries, we learn that Catherine and Heathcliff were often starved and sent to bed with no food. They were often beaten if they didn't say their prayers. And so we actually have a story of children who were abused. Another part of the book, we have letters written by Isabella, who is Edgar's sister. So when Heathcliff returns, as part of his revenge, he seduces Isabella and then he takes her away. And then she writes letters to her brother. And in these letters, we learn about what a monster Heathcliff is. And so we have her point of view. And I like the way the story's written. I like the fact that Mr. Lockwood is the outsider. So he is like us, the reader. Then Nellie Dean knows the full history of the family, but she's prejudiced and she's unreliable. Then we have the diaries, and I think we can believe the diaries because they would actually show what life was like. And then we have the letters, so we have a glimpse into Heathcliff's character from those, and we can believe the letters. So we're more than a reader, we're almost puzzling together the pieces and putting them together to actually work out what the truth is. I think it's really clever the way that it's constructed, and I find it an interesting book. I didn't find it a difficult book to read at all. I think if you're expecting a straightforward story, then you won't get that, but it isn't a difficult book. And lastly, my last reason for why I recommend this book is because it's like a Shakespearean tragedy, where a character's actions then affect their downfall and bring about their downfall. So Heathcliff, because he is so determined to seek revenge, he actually then brings about his own downfall because he is so unhappy and he is so tied to Wuthering Heights. But even a character like Edgar Linton, who's supposed to be the opposite to Heathcliff, when Heathcliff seduces Isabella and takes her away, she writes to Edgar asking for help, and Edgar refuses to help Isabella. And this eventually brings about Edgar's downfall because it means that Isabella then has a child with Heathcliff. So the next generation are then linked together. So Heathcliff's child and then Edgar's child are linked together. And so in effect, by turning his back on his sister, Edgar brings about the downfall of his next generation. I really enjoyed reading the book, and I returned to it at this time of year, and I recommend it as a really brilliant read. So Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you next time.